Hello and welcome to Two Tall Guys Talking Sales. We're your hosts. I'm Kevin.
And I'm Sean.
And we're glad you're here. For the next 15 minutes, we'll talk about a sales issue, big and small, for salespeople, sales leaders, and selling situations. We're glad you're here, and let's get started. Today, we're going to talk about not only the selling process, but the buildup of how to build a pipeline for a more effective sales process. This, if you're a leader or a salesperson or a sales manager, this should apply to you unilaterally because the content we're going to share with you today is real world content about building a team of buyers, not a team of sellers, but a team of buyers. And this applies no matter if you're charging down the road of an enterprise sale, a week over week repetitive sale, a consumable sale where you're selling to a manufacturer or some sort of distribution channel, or if you're selling professional services to a broad scope of client.
This is a great subject, Kevin. I find that many salespeople kind of get hooked on one person that they are talking to, and that person is kind of taking the lead in the conversation. They've been their project manager. Maybe they're the top dog in the company you're selling to, but they are the person that is answering most of the questions. They're the person that everybody else is referring to or looking at for the first answer to the question. And the struggle that salespeople have is they get single focused or single threaded in only dealing with that person. And I'd like to counsel salespeople that in many, many cases, not every case, but in many, many cases, the top person in the organization, be that the owner of the company, the president of the company, the chief operating officer, the CFO, whatever that top person is in this process, they rarely make a decision unilaterally. They typically make a decision after everybody else weighs in. They'll sit around a table and they'll say, okay, we've been looking at ABC company and XYZ company. Which one do you guys like? And they all have an opportunity to voice their opinion and explain why. And maybe it's the same opinion. Maybe you won in every single case. Then the top person, the VP, the director, the owner says, okay, based on this, it sounds like we should go with this ABC company. And that is how the decision is made. Now, he made or she made the final decision. I'm not going to argue with that a bit. However, if everybody else said ABC company and the top person wanted XYZ company, it's pretty rare to say, well, all four of you are wrong. We're going to go with XYZ because they're a better company. That just simply doesn't happen in most selling situations. Not every selling situation. There's no such thing as every in sales. But in most selling situations, we simply don't have the top person overriding the desires of the many, of the committee. And most buying organizations have a buying committee that is gathered together to evaluate your products. The challenge is, don't just focus on that VP, that director, that owner that is obviously the most senior person, the most powerful person. And I'm not saying don't focus on them at all, but I'm simply saying, remember that Sam, Sally, Joe, and Steve also have an opinion and they will sway that top person. I call those people influencers. I think you need to have every influencer that you possibly can in order to make a deal happen, especially when you are being ghosted by that top person who is just too busy to return your phone call. Not because he's being evil, not because he doesn't want to talk to you. He's just really busy because he's the top person in the organization.
Thinking more along the lines for both enterprise and the repetitive sale, it may not necessarily be a top person. It could be as simple as your main contact has gone on vacation. If you're sitting out there in the audience now and you're saying, oh, shucks, I only know one person at my company and I need to be there every week to make sure I have a repetitive order, that's an opportunity for you to build additional relationships. What happens when you don't have these multi-threaded relationships. There's a term for you. If you've never heard the term multi-threaded, it just means you've got more than one person involved in the deal versus, not surprisingly, single-threaded. Single-threaded deals are where you're only dealing with one person. Single-threaded opportunities do happen for certain. There are a lot of entrepreneurs, solopreneurs out in the world that make decisions, and they're a power of one. There are situations where you'll have single-threaded deals, but for the purposes of today, the value we bring here is that we have both skinned our knees trying to sell to one person for one big deal and had a really disappointed, no thank you kind of moment in our quota attainment journey. What happens to you if you're listening as a leader out there thinking, what is my sales team doing? The question you can ask at your next sales meeting is, who else have you talked to? There's nothing wild and crazy here. And that's the beauty of what Sean and I do is we've done this so many times for long enough. We know that it's not about how complex our questions need to be to get crazy, insightful, parlayed answers that are really disconnected and we have some special sauce. It's really about doing the simple things well. If you're a leader that can do the simple things well or need some coaching on how to do the simple things well, that's kind of why Sean and I are putting together this podcast. We've got this market need that we've identified in that people often don't have a selling system. If you have one, great, you're in a small minority. But the large majority of business to business sales organizations don't have a selling system. They don't have methodologies. And this is where multi-threading comes in. It's in the methodologies where you identify a team. If you're in the Sandler system, it's called a cast of characters. You may call it a buying committee. If you're in the integrity selling process, you're talking about DMUs, decision-making units. Who is the person that you need to call on from a persona standpoint, but who are the influencers? There's a neat chart that I don't even remember where I heard it from this point, but it's called the RACI chart. It's responsible. That's the R. The A is accountable. The C is consulted, and the I is informed. In the decision tree, a CEO or president may be responsible for making the final call. But the accountable person is who they've assigned to make sure the project gets done. The consultant is the subject matter experts that might be users of software or the shop floor, the asset technician that's running a machine that you have to buy a supply room for. And the informed is the purchasing department. Hey, so-and-so sending you a contract. Here's the sample terms. Please go ahead and review them. They're not making the call. They're just issuing a PO. I have had it in my career. Unfortunately, I had to learn this lesson twice. I've had this in my career where I didn't have enough of the right people that I was talking to. My deals either got the no because I wasn't talking to the right person with budget authority or I proposed too quickly something, or I wasn't involving procurement early enough. The deal didn't happen fast enough. It took more days.
I think that's great. And thank you for giving those examples. I'm going to throw another example because I think, Kevin, you know that I'm kind of hooked on MedPick. MedPick is actually a combination of people and non-people, information that you need, as well as people that may have delivered that information. If you're a MedPick person, at least my version of MedPick, which is MEDDPICCC, lots of letters in that med. The E stands for economic buyer. A lot of times that's the executive. The P implies a process of how that paperwork is going to flow through the organization. That in turn implies that you're going to get who's the lawyer involved, who's the buyer or the purchasing person that's involved. Whatever. You're going to have some kind of a process for that paperwork to flow through. And then the two of the C's are coach and champion. And that right there implies that we're going to have 3 or 4 or 5 people involved in the deal, and to appropriately figure out what MedPick is and to fill it out in your system, you're going to actually have 4 or 5 people. You're going to have that cast of characters or that decision-making committee or whatever you want to call it. It's all basically the same thing. We are basically trying to figure out who is making the decision and which persons are they listening to as they make that decision. One of the other tools that I like to talk about, and I blogged about it many times on my site, is who is in the power matrix. So the power matrix is a way for me to cheat a little bit and say that for deals that are less than 10% of my quota, then I want to get 9 people in the power matrix. It's a 3x3. It's 3 levels high, 3 different levels in the organization, and you kind of choose which 3 levels you want to have. And then 3 departments wide or 3 people wide. I try to get them in multi-departments if that makes sense for that sales opportunity. If it's a bigger deal, if it's bigger than 10% of my annual quota, Let's think about that. Bigger than 10% of my annual quota means it's really going to make a difference in my career. It's definitely going to make a difference in my year. I'm going to do 5 by 5. Now, 5 by 5 or 25 people in the power matrix means I'm going to have 5 levels in that, which means I'm going to have people that are very low in the organization that are probably easy to talk to because they're very low and they're not very busy, to very high in the organization. And it also implies that it's going to be a bigger company, that you actually have 5 levels of the organization that you're selling to. The 5 wide are, once again, 5 different departments, or maybe it's not so much 5 different departments as it is for multiple people in each department that might be affected. Because it's not unusual for many things that we sell. I don't care if it's recurring sales or if it's enterprise sales. The reality it is multiple people are going to chime in on the decision-making process. And we just got done with the end of the year. It's early in this year for us. If you look back on last year, and if you were in trouble and you had to get that deal done by the end of the quarter, end of the year, and you were single-threaded, now you're trying to figure out, when's Joe going to be leaving for the holidays? When's he done for the year? Because you need him to sign off on this deal. That's when you really need to have multiple people in the deal that you can call and say, where's Joe? Because he has to sign this deal. And who's Joe's backup? Because he's already gone. And this is when it happens. It's the end of the month, end of the quarter, end of the year.
This brings us, or allows us to bring this conversation full circle. We started by saying, hey, we've been talking about enterprise level deals and repetitive deals, repetitive selling, relationships, but we're bringing this all back and talking about how many people should be involved. You as the sales team or the sales leadership team can do a better job of inspecting your pipeline. When you're looking at your pipeline, or when you're reviewing your pipeline, or when somebody outside your company is evaluating the quality of your pipeline, because that happens too in business. When all these things or any of these things are happening, they're looking for these kinds of components. How much more effective could you as an owner, leader, or salesperson be in your job if you had more than one relationship to rely on? Right? I would venture a guess that you probably know, if you're a listener out there and you're active listening to podcasts and gaining knowledge, you probably know a lot of people. My sales hypothesis for you is this. I would venture a guess that you know somebody who's changed jobs this year. And we're very early in the year. Already, I know people who have changed jobs this year. We see a lot of LinkedIn announcements that says, hey, congratulations on starting a new position or getting promoted within a company. Now, when that happens, it leaves a void or a vacuum, and somebody else has got to restart a procurement or an evaluation process. This is a risk you can avoid. I'll say that again for the people in the back. This is a risk to your pipeline that you can avoid by being thoughtful up front in documenting, naming, enriching the relationship with the cast of characters. Next week, we're going to come back and we're going to talk more about building pipeline that fits this kind of mold. Now, this is important for anybody who is thinking about Q1 through Q4 and any point in between, whether you've got a monthly quota, a weekly quota, a quarterly or annual quota, it doesn't matter. You need to be building effective pipeline. Next week, we can talk about everything from who, accessing, referrals, outreach, messaging. We've got a lot of ground that we can cover, but we need to think about how we're covering that ground. So I want to give you a little teaser here. Think about activities and not the kind that's dialing for dollars and spam, right? We all know where those go, right to the delete file. But we're thinking about all the effective ways of building quality relationships for each prospect and with each customer. Our future perfect selves rely on our ability to execute well now. If you're wondering in 9 months why you don't have a full pipeline and you're looking at the end of the year going, holy cow, I'm really between a rock and a hard place, it's probably because of the work that's happening right now, early in the year, that is affecting and impacting your ability to gain referrals, i.e. trust. That's one of Sean's favorite topics, the transfer of trust. I call it the currency of trust. But all these things really matter. And the more you as a salesperson, sales leader, or executive are pushing the limits of how to effectively build relationships, the more successful your sales organization will be. I'm Kevin. This has been a fun time. Sean, you have really actually took some notes on what you said. That was really insightful. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you very much, Kevin. See you next week. Thank you very much for joining us on this podcast of Two Tall Guys Talking Sales. We hope that we were able to share some valuable insight, valuable knowledge with you to make your selling adventures easier and more successful. Please join us every week. We drop these on Tuesday afternoon at 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Please subscribe to us in your favorite podcast player. Also, please join us on LinkedIn, where we do a CEO workshop, and that CEO workshop is dedicated monthly to big questions that CEOs are having and how to grow their business and drive sales. You can find us on LinkedIn. Just search for Two Tall Guys Talking Sales. Thank you very much. Have a great day.